Hi, everyone, and welcome to our third podcast with the clinical education team. Today, we are going to talk a little bit about different factors of stress, burnout, and of course, some good self-care and just all of the components that surround all of those topics. So I think we'll get started here with Jesse, just talking about a little bit of just about stress and how it impacts us and some of the positive things and maybe some of the disadvantages.
Right. Thanks, Em. Yeah, as we all know, stress can be, stressful, right? We've all had stress. We've all had a stressful year. We have some days are absolutely more stressful than others. And something that's really interesting to think about is how stress impacts our body. And we think often about that adrenaline rush that our heart is racing, we get a little clammy, start sweating a little bit. And that absolutely happens. And when we can start to train our mind to think about the positive elements of stress, our body will follow. So we know that stress impacts our cardiovascular system, it impacts our overall well-being and health. And if we can start to train ourselves to think about the positive elements of stress, we're going to mitigate some of those negative effects. So when I said adrenaline, one of the other major stress hormones is oxytocin. And that is kind of termed the cuddly hormone. And so when we have stress, our body has this built-in mechanism to seek out human connection and social interactions because we know that it's like a resilience piece. Oxytocin that's released during stressful times makes us crave interaction. And so that should be a really strong reminder to us that when we're working under stressful situations, when we know we're encountering these stressful elements of our life, to talk to somebody, to approach our coworkers. If we're noticing it in other people, we should take that time and create that space where it's okay to talk about stress. It's going to honestly impact our overall wellness if we can create that human connection there. So I think that's a really cool element of stress. So it's hard to practice that, and we'll get into that as well, but that's one of the pieces of training our minds to respond to stress.
Well, and yeah, maybe we should just go into why is it hard to kind of make these connections or talk about stress or talk about taking care of ourselves. I think there's so many dynamics to that of why it's challenging. Um, my mind always goes to that kind of that safe space idea of, do people feel safe, have that safe space psychologically at their workplace? Do they feel like, yeah, you know what, I do have that coworker I know I can go talk to? So like you said, Jesse, building those connections with at least even one coworker, and just saying, yeah, they're my safe space, or yes, I know I can talk to my leadership team. So I think that's where my mind goes to, is like, do you feel psychologically safe to talk about those things? What about you guys?
Absolutely.
I struggle with consistency when it comes to self-care though. Um,
Totally.
I think it's just that balance of home and work and kind of doing what I know is effective, but doing it on a regular basis is something I personally struggle with for sure. But I know that I need to, and it's really important.
Well, I think it's really hard for everyone in their own elements or just because of their own pieces of their life to make self-care work for them. And I know the things that contribute to my peace and happiness and like giving me comfort in life also gives me anxiety. I know that having control of my environment and clean space and spending the time with my kids and getting that physical exercise, that all makes me feel better about self-care in general. And it also contributes to my angst of, oh, I need to do this, I need to do this, I need to do this.
It's another like to-do list
Hmm.
item sometimes. Yeah, for sure.
Totally. And
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
there, I'm sure, like small practices that are going to be beneficial. I agree, it's so hard to make those routine, and it just takes a lot of practice,
Yeah.
commitment. What do you
And
think, Em?
Absolutely. Oh,
And
go ahead,
Emily,
Trish.
when you were talking about talking with a coworker, you know, just sharing with someone, I think I have struggled with that in the past too, because it's very vulnerable to
Exactly.
open up and share those thoughts and feelings, and that can feel scary sometimes too.
Mhm.
But you're right, it is so important to be open and talk about those things,
Yeah,
for sure.
absolutely.
Think that's kind of where that positive, tolerable stress can turn into no longer tolerable, right? When we don't seek out those connections, when we don't find that appropriate outlet for stress, we're contributing to that almost toxic stress. So you want to find a way to stop that before that happens.
Mhm. Well, and everything I hear, us discussing here is it. I don't think there is a single person that doesn't feel like, yeah, I felt that pull in all of these different aspects of my life, and feeling, oh man, another to-do list, and home, and work, and all the other things that we're attached to that we love being a part of, but also can feel like, man, okay, here we go again, one more thing after the other. And when do we sit back and have that time just for ourselves to reflect? So that kind of goes into that self-care idea where, it's that whole idea, like, we have to fill our own buckets before we can fill other people's, and before we can, like, give our talents and, give all the good things about us to others, whether that's at work, to our kids, at home. Um, I always think it's something like people say a lot, like, oh, my family never gets the best me, because after work, it's like, I just, need to kind of zone out. So I think, yeah, people feel pulled if they don't get that chance for themselves. So what is self-care? So obviously it's that practice of taking care of yourself, and really important to remember that that is not selfish. That's something I need to tell myself over and over again, because I truly can't show up as a good coworker, good family member, or anything like that if I'm not investing in myself. So taking care of yourself means like that, the physical aspect, mentally and emotionally. Um, and Jesse, you talked about just how, stressors do impact all of those things, us physically, our cardiovascular system, et cetera, and mentally and emotionally. So self-care can be whatever fills you back up. That looks different for everyone. There are some general good things: consistent sleep, um, trying to eat a balanced, balanced nutritional meals, and moving your body. Those are kind of those basic things. But what else? There's got to be some beyond that things. Gratitude, expressing that and finding that positive, like you said, Jesse, find that positive spin on stress a little bit, and like, your body responds differently to it. Your mind responds differently when we kind of change our perspective to gratitude versus like a lack of something.
It's funny
So
that you say that, Emily, because caregivers, we find that people who are actually caregivers don't have as much negative results of stress, because they are providing or getting that human connection from other people, and so it
makes sense.
counteracts the negative effects of stress. It almost looks, that kind of tolerable stress looks a lot like joy in terms of what the effects on our like cardiovascular system and things. It's a natural anti-inflammatory, interestingly.
Yeah. Yeah. That is very interesting. So yeah, and I already kind of touched upon, okay, so what is self-care? Why is it important? Again, like, um, we really can't put our best selves forward unless we're kind of refilling the tank a little bit. So maybe we can go into like practices that we have each found helpful, in kind of our journey of self-care. So Trish, what do you specifically try to do?
Um, I have a gratitude journal, or I just take, 10 minutes in the morning, and sometimes at night if I didn't get to it in the morning. And I write down at least 3 things that I'm grateful for. I also just kind of do a thought dump, whatever that looks like. And if I'm doing it in the morning, I do try to write down a couple of intentions for my day. And on the opposite end, if I don't get to it in the morning, because my mornings are sort of precious to me, it's before my kids get up, it's before the day starts.
Right.
I like to do some stretching and a little meditation. It for me, it helps set the tone for the day. And if I don't get it, I definitely feel it later. But if I'm doing it at night, I do like to write down, what are like 3 feelings I had throughout the day, and kind of think on those. And did I react appropriately? Could I have changed something? If I didn't have a great day, well, why was that? What can I do to change it in the future? That's personally what
Love
I have
that.
started incorporating, and I really have found it to be very helpful for me. Jesse, what do you do?
I'm just so in awe at that at your practice. I'm like, oh wow, that sounds so great. Um, some things
Perfect.
some things that I do, and I kind of talked about it in our very first podcast, and I didn't realize what it was until I reflected on it a little bit more, but it's like a transitional activity where you go from one thing to another, because you're at work, you're doing task after task after task, and then you switch to your family. It's just like one new struggle after another struggle, or not a struggle necessarily, but a challenge or a to-do list. And so I find if I take a couple minutes to reset a little bit, whatever that might look like, if I step outside, the thing I had mentioned earlier in our other podcast was I walked outside to get the mail with my daughter, and I found that small amount of time in the fresh air was enough to reset my mind and my body for that, the next to-do list, the next kind of set of items. So those transitional activities I find are whatever works for you, and you can make them routine, is really beneficial. Even something like in our clinical orientation, when we host that on our 10-minute breaks, creating that habit of not checking my email during our 10-minute breaks, and standing up and moving, doing like 2 minutes of stretching, I've found to be really helpful. And I don't realize how necessary it is until after I've done it.
Yeah, it's an
Because
environmental change almost. So
Right.
it removes you. I feel that when I go outside, like you're kind of saying, with your daughter walking to the mailbox. Yeah,
absolutely.
definitely.
Sure.
How about you,
Love
Emily?
that. Yeah, I agree with all of those. I think I touch upon each of those, and again try to be consistent with some of those things, and touching a little bit on that gratitude piece. For me, what really fills me back up is that connection with people, my friends and family. I am an extrovert. You guys know at this point, love to talk. So for me, that does fill me back up. And I know that that's so important for me to maintain those consistent connections, whether it's just a quick phone call, a text, whatever it is, but also letting those people know I'm so grateful for you. Like I get this return feeling of like, yeah, I just want them to know, because you have truly impacted, this well-being for me, and have helped me get through, not just last year, the challenging year, but through life. We always have ups and downs. So that for me is one of the big aspects of self-care, is connection. And Jesse, you talked about all those good benefits of it too, so it makes sense of maybe why I've always gravitated towards that.
Yeah, now we know why, right? It's all that oxytocin floundering around.
Exactly. Thanks for bringing the science into it. But and just to kind of wrap everything up here, we do want to plug this resilience plan worksheet that was created by our team, that kind of helps you make a little plan for yourself. How am I going to take care of myself? Remembering, your purpose in life, knowing what your stress symptoms are, so you don't get to that point of burnout. And then, yeah, what are we doing this all for, right? So it's good to have those reminders and be grateful. Find those things you're grateful for, and look at that worksheet often. So we'll make sure that we get that out to all of you so you can make your own self-care plan and take care of yourself. It's important.
Thanks for joining us, Ecumen.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.